Close your eyes and slip away from the day's noise into the forgotten world of a medieval undertaker, a life of silence and solemn duty. Walk among graves, touch history, and hear the unspoken truths of burying the dead. What time is it for you, and where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments before you drift off. Subscribe for more peaceful journeys. Sleep well, you're not alone tonight. It always begins in silence. Before the first bell tolls, before the sun lifts its lazy golden eye above the grey village roofs, you are already awake. Your breath makes soft clouds in the early morning chill, curling around your nose as you crouch beside a mound of earth still damp from last night's rain. The mist wraps around your ankles like a shy animal. This is your world, not the world of merchants and milkmaids, but one beneath, where every step feels like a trespass into another realm. The shovel is cold in your hands, the wood handle stained with the work of your predecessors. You didn't choose this life, not exactly. It settled over you like a foge inevitable, clinging and quiet. There is no applause for waking before dawn to dig 6 feet into soil that does not yield easily. Only the company of worms and whispers. People look through you in daylight. They avoid your eyes in the street, make the sign of the cross behind your back, as if death might rub off on their sleeves. But here, in this hush, among the headstones and half-forgotten names, you are not invisible. The dead know you. The dead wait for you. You don't fear them. That fear burned out of you long ago, maybe the day you first touched a body that was still warm, freshly plucked from life, like fruit too early from the tree. The weight of it surprised you. It wasn't just heaviness, it was stillness, the unbearable finality of stillness. They say people look peaceful in death. That's a lie. They look emptied, like puppets with their strings cut. You learned not to flinch. You learned how to lift them gently, how to close their eyes with your thumbs, how to comb blood-matted hair without retching. You learned what to say when grieving families broke down in front of you, though you rarely spoke more than needed. Words were for priests. Your work was quieter. Your hands, rough and cracked from earth and cold water, did the talking. And in your silence, there was a kind of reverence. You are not just a gravedigger. You are the last one to hold them, the last to see them as something more than memory. That responsibility carves into your bones far deeper than the ache of labour. Sometimes, when the wind carries the scent of burning wood and winter rot, you remember your first burial. The bells had rung twice. A child. Tiny hands, face still pink with fever. You were younger then, barely taller than the spade you dragged behind you. The memory is yellowed with time, like parchment left in the sun, but the feeling is as sharp as ever. The way the mother wailed, the way your own hands trembled. No one tells you how to bury someone smaller than your fear. No one prepares you for the softness of children in death. You dug too slowly. The priest scolded you. But you remember how you knelt in that pit afterward, after they left, whispering something not a prayer, just a thought, maybe a wish. And since that day, Every burial feels like speaking back to that moment. You begin your mornings among the dead, not because of duty, but because there, in the half-light of dawn and morning, is the only place the world makes quiet sense. Life outside is loud with hunger and greed and shouting. But down here, the silence is pure. The silence is yours. You were not born into this role with ceremony. There was no calling from the heavens, no sign from the stars. You were simply left. A sick winter had taken your mother, and your father vanished into the fog of bad debts and bad decisions. You don't remember his face. Just the way he coughed wet, ragged and endless. When the neighbours found you curled beside your mother's stiffening body, too quiet for a child, no one wanted to keep you. The baker had too many mouths. The blacksmith claimed he had no use for a girl, though you weren't sure whether you were one. You were just small. And small was inconvenient. So they sent you to the edge of the village, to the old man who buried people for coin and didn't talk much. The Undertaker. He took you in, not out of kindness, but necessity. His back had begun to crook with age, his hands trembling just enough to make washing the dead a slow, frustrating affair. You were not welcomed with words. You were given a bucket, a cloth, and the stare of a man who'd lived too long with silence. He smelled like earth and ashes. His cottage was low-roofed and cold, the walls lined with wooden shelves, holding bottles of herbs, bones, candles, and rags too stained to name. He never raised his voice, never smiled, but he watched you closely, always. You learned to move like a shadow. Quiet. Quick. You learned to hold your breath near the dead, to ignore the buzzing of flies, to scrub under nails until your fingers bled. You were not taught in words, you were taught in repetition. At first, the work made your stomach twist. The slick texture of skin turning, the black bloom of rot beneath clothing, the sight of eyes that saw no longer. But slowly, something inside you grew still. You stopped gagging. You stopped looking away. You became a mirror of the man who trained you. Not cruel. Not warm. Just precise. A living tool. A necessary extension of the ritual no one wanted to see. You carried stretchers through alleyways in the dark. You fetched water from the frozen well with hands cracked and red. You sewed mouths shut. You stitched the skins of those no longer sleeping. By 12, you had handled more death than most priests. By 14, you no longer cried in your sleep. But there were moments small, strange ones, when you felt something flicker beneath the routine. You remember the first time he let you dig alone. The grave was for a soldier who had died far from home. No family came. No priest. Just you and the wind, and a name scratched on a scrap of leather tied to the man's ankle. As your shovel cut the earth, you found yourself humming. It wasn't a song you knew, just a low sound that came from your chest, steady and broken, like the creak of old wood. Later, when the coffin was lowered and the dirt returned to the ground, you stayed behind. You knelt and whispered his name because someone had to. That night, The old man placed a small wooden token on your bedder, carving of a bird, worn and chipped. He said nothing. But you understood. This was the closest thing to praise you'd ever get. Apprenticed to shadows, shaped by silence, you had begun your long becoming. You were no longer just a child. You were the hands that carried the forgotten, the voice that named the nameless. And no one noticed, except the dead. Here is part 3. The Reek of Mortality 1000. 500 words in 3 immersive paragraphs of 500 plus words each, following the same rich, sensory, second-person tone. You smell death before you see it. That's the first thing people never understand. Death is not a single scent, not one tidy thing you can bottle or name. It is layer clinging, creeping, curling into your clothes and skin and even your breath. The first layer is rot. Not the sweet rot of apples falling in autumn, but a sharp, wet animal rot. It hits your nose like sour meat and copper coins. Some corpses come stiff and dry, especially in winter, frozen hard and clean smelling, like damp stone. But summer is cruel. In summer, death swells. Flesh rises like overripe fruit, splitting along the belly and thighs. The skin bubbles. Maggots stir before you unwrap the shroud. The reek follows you home. It lingers on your tongue, no matter how many herbs you chew or how many times you scrub your face with vinegar. You've tried everything mint oil, lavender, cloves in your pocket. Still, the stench comes back in your dreams. And it's not just the bodies. The tools smell too. The cloths, the buckets, the water turned brown. Even the earth smells wrong after too many graves. You begin to recognize the scent of each death. Fever has a hot iron tang. Drowning smells like lakeweed and bile. A woman dead in childbirth carries a scent so bitter, so intimate, that it makes your stomach knot, no matter how long you've been doing this. You never say this to anyone. But death has a voice, and it speaks in scent. Over time, you learn not to flinch. You breathe through your mouth. You move quickly. You train your body to respond without letting your mind wander into imagination. The worst moments are when it surprises you when the corpse is too fresh, still warm from life, smelling faintly of soap or flowers, as if they forgot they were supposed to be dead. Once, a young man was brought in who had fallen from scaffolding, head split like a melon. His body hadn't started to rot yet. He smelled like sweat and pine tar, and something in you rebelled. You kept thinking he would sit up, that he might cough and blink. You dropped your brush. The old man noticed, but said nothing. He simply lit a candle and let the silence settle between you. It helped. The fire did something, burned the scent just enough to bring the moment back into place. That's the trick of being an Undertaker. Your senses must be sharp, but not too sharp. You must smell death, feel death, recognize it, without ever inviting it too far into yourself. You must let it pass over you, like cold wind. If you take it in too deeply, If you begin to dwell on what it means to wash a child's feet clean of dried blood, or to wipe vomit from a merchant's chin, you will rot from the inside just as surely as they do. You must smell it, yes, but you must never let it become you. Sometimes you wonder how others can ignore it. In the village square, people sip from mugs and laugh, and you think, how do they not smell it? The graveyard is just behind the chapel. The river where the unclaimed are floated away is only a mile east. The butcher's waist lies open behind his shop, drawing crows and worse. The air is filled with reminders. But they walk past, breathing like nothing clings. You envy them. Not their ignorance, but their distance. You have no distance. Death sleeps beneath your nails, settles in the folds of your robes, lives in the back of your throat like a taste that will never leave. You've tried bathing in herbs, scrubbing with ash, even burning your linens. But it never fully goes. One day, a girl you once knew from the market pinched her nose as you passed. She whispered to her friend, "He always smells like the grave." You wanted to scream. Instead, you walked on. Later, you sat by the river and let your feet dangle in the mud-cold water, letting the current lap at your ankles like a dog. You thought about how easy it would be to let yourself fall forward, sink into the dark. But then a dragonfly landed on your toe, brilliant green and stupidly alive. You didn't move, just watched it flicker. The stench of death was all around you, but in that stillness, the air smelled briefly like moss and breath and light. And so you walked back home. You still smelled of death, but for a moment you remembered what life could smell like too. You begin with the hands. That's always where you start. Cold, often stiff, sometimes curled in on themselves as if still clinging to the last thing they held. A piece of cloth. A lover's fingers. The edge of a bed. Sometimes nothing at all. The fingers must be straightened carefully, slowly, almost like coaxing a frightened bird from a snare. You speak to them, sometimes not out loud, but in the rhythm of your movements. "It's all right now," your hands seem to say. You don't have to hold on anymore. The nails are cleaned next. Dirt under the edges, blood sometimes. Or wax if they were priests. You scrub them gently with a stiff little brush and water boiled with rosemary. Rosemary masks the smell. It does not remove it. Still, you try. You trim the nails if they're too long. Unless the family asks you not to sew, believe a soul needs every part of itself for the afterlife. You've learned to ask first. It's strange how the hands tell stories the face never can. Calluses, missing fingers, wedding rings welded to swollen knuckles. You find yourself wondering who they touched, what they built, what they broke. But you don't ask questions aloud. That's not your role. Your role is preparation, cleansing, respect. The last human gesture before the earth takes them. You move to the face. This is where care becomes reverence. You clean gently around the eyes, which you have already closed, usually with small coins or stones, until the lids agree to stay. Some eyes resist, especially the newly dead. They twitch open as if something inside is not yet done looking. You've seen this 100 times, and still it unnerves you. There's a moment, always, where your breath catches. Not from fear, but from the closeness of it, the intimacy of death watching you back. The mouth comes next. If it's open, you sew it shut with catgut thread, looped through the inside of the lips and pulled tight. You've done this with trembling fingers and steady ones, but always with silence. There is something sacred about the mouth. It was the gate of every word, every kiss, every scream. Now it must rest. You comb the hair. You wash the scalp with lavender water if you can spare it. You sponge down the arms, the legs, the torso. You cover wounds if there are any. Pack the nose and ears with cloth if the decay has begun. You never speak during this. Never hum, never rush. Your mind slows. You feel like you are walking underwater. Every movement a ritual. Every touch a farewell. And when you finally dress the body in its best tunic or gown, or sometimes just a sackcloth, you tie it closed with thin cords and tuck herbs into the folds. Sage for cleansing. Thyme for courage. Mint for memory. Each herb a promise. Each step a kindness they will never thank you for. And then comes the final moment when they are ready and you must step back. Sometimes the family is waiting. They look at you with red eyes or dry ones, with suspicion or gratitude or fear. You always bow slightly, never too much. Enough to say, I was gentle. If no one is there, if they are truly alone, you stay a little longer. You touch the brow. You whisper a name. You light a candle and sit beside them until the flame flickers low. Once you sang. It was winter and the man had died on the road, found days after the snow had covered him. No one claimed him. You cleaned the dirt from his feet, picked the gravel from his palms, and as you worked, a tune came to your lips without permission. A lullaby your mother used to hum. You sang quietly, your voice broken and raw. The room felt warm for a moment. Or maybe it was just your breath misting the air. Either way, you stayed there until the wick died out, and you felt something settle, not peace, but a kind of stillness that was close enough. Preparing the body is never just about death. It is about witnessing what remains. It is the last time anyone will touch them with intention. The last time their name will be spoken without sorrow. You do this because someone must. Because the dead deserve to be known once more, even in silence. Even in stillness. Even in the brief hush before the soil closes over them. You were never meant to be this busy. In a normal year, you would bury one, maybe two bodies. A weakened old man gone soft with time, a child caught in fever's cruel cradle, a woman stilled in childbirth. And even those were enough to fill your days with the quiet ache of morning work. But plague years do not ask politely. They arrive with a cough that turns to blood, a fever that burns out eyes, a blackened lump in the groin or underarm, as if the devil has pinched the flesh and left his mark. The first cases bring silence. Whispers. A house shuttered too early, a cart left abandoned. Then it spreads. Fast. Hungry. Unrelenting. And suddenly your name is on every tongue, spoken not in prayer but in desperation. Fetch the Undertaker. Where is the grave man? Please, bury my son. You do not sleep. You barely eat. Your hands become cracked from cold water and lime. Your lungs sting from the stench of burning clothes and clove smoke meant to purify the air. The bells toll morning and night, and you can no longer tell one day from the next. There are so many bodies now, stacked like cordwood, limbs tangled, mouths frozen mid-scream. No time for rituals. No herbs left. Just pits, deep and wide, and the endless shoveling of earth over forgotten names. At first, you try to keep your rituals. You still wash the faces. You still speak the names if someone whispers them to you. But as the bodies pile and your arms go numb, the rites shrink. A cloth on the face. A silent nod. A stone placed gently on the chest before the dirt comes down. The dead stop being people and start becoming number show many today. 16? 22? 40? You cannot keep count. One day, you are asked to dig a trench along the river. The priest refuses to come, says the land is cursed. But the land does not care. The land always takes. So you dig. The hole is wide enough for a dozen at a time. They arrive in wagons now, thrown together. Women still in aprons, boys with half-laced boots. A newborn wrapped in its mother's arms, both gone blue with cold. You do not cry. You cannot. If you begin, you won't stop. Instead, you work until your legs tremble, until your fingers bleed. You sleep sitting up against the cemetery wall, shovel in hand, like a soldier too tired to march. People avoid you more than ever now. Some spit when you pass. Others make the sign against evil. They think you carry death in your clothes. And maybe they're right. You do carry it. In your hands. In your dreams. In the skin around your nails, where the blood has dried black. But someone must do this. Someone must send the dead off, even if it is without songs or stones or words. There comes a night, during the worst of it, when the moon hangs like a slit throat over the chapel spire, and the air is thick with smoke from burning linens. You are burying a man whose face is so distorted by disease, you cannot tell if his eyes are open or closed. As you lift the sheet, something inside you breaks. Not a sound. Not a sob. Just a crack, deep and quiet, like ice beneath your feet. You step back. You drop the body. And you fall to your knees not in prayer, but in sheer exhaustion. Your breath catches. Your vision blurs. You are not sure how long you kneel there. An hour. a minute, a lifetime. But then, from the shadows, a voice. A child's voice. Thin. Barely a whisper. Thank you. You look up, startled, but there is no one there. Just the wind through the trees, the creak of wood, the flicker of a dying lantern. You are not sure what you heard. Maybe nothing. Maybe your mind finally snapping. But you gather yourself. You finish the burial. You light a small flame and leave it there, beside the grave, flickering like the memory of something holy. That night, when you sleep, you dream of still waters, of hands reaching toward you, not to drag you down, but to lift you up. And when you wake, you go back to work. Because even in plague, even in the thick of horror, someone must bear witness. Someone must remember. And in that remembering, there is a sliver of grace. You walk through the village, and eyes slide off you like oil on stone. People know your name, but they never speak it unless they must. You pass women at the well, and their chatter stops. They look past you, through you, around you, as if death might follow in your shadow and settle on their children's shoulders. Once, when you reached for a loaf at the baker's store, he pulled it back, muttering that it was already sold. The truth hangs between you. He does not want your fingers on his bread. The market vendors overcharge you. Children whisper stories about you behind fences, saying your eyes are red from staring too long into graves, that you sleep in coffins, that you drink the blood of the bodies you bury. You don't correct them. You don't speak at all, not anymore, not unless someone asks you to. There's a silence around you now, built not just from your work, but from the way the world recoils from it. You are the final act no one wants to think about. A necessary evil. They pay you poorly if they pay you at all. Most claim they'll bring coin next week. Some drop crusts of bread at your door, as if you're a stray dog. And yet, when their loved ones die, when the fever returns, when the river gives up another swollen corpse, they come to you. Always to you. And you never say no. You could, of course. You could turn them away. Say, not unless you pay me first. Not unless you stop treating me like a ghost while I'm still breathing. But you don't, because you know what it feels like to have no one. And because, beneath your calloused hands and tired bones, a strange tenderness still lives. You do not bury people for silver. You bury them because no one else will. You bury them because there is dignity in death, even when the living forget that. The priest may give the sermon, the family may weep, but it is your hands that carry the body, your arms that lower it into the pit, your fingers that press the final handful of earth to seal the grave. It is you who stays behind after everyone else has gone, making sure the marker doesn't lean, making sure the wind hasn't scattered the flowers. And they don't see this. They never stay long enough to see this. To them, you are the smell of rot and the stain of loss. They cannot look at you without remembering what they've lost. So they look away. And when payment comes, it is often in half measures mouldy bread, a torn blanket, a whisper of thanks as they hurry out the door. You once buried a woman's husband for free after she sobbed on your shoulder. 3 days later, she pretended not to know you in the street. Her child tugged at her skirt and pointed. That's the man who carried Papa. She shushed him and pulled him away. And yet, you continue. You rise with the sun and tie your boots with fingers cracked from cold. You shoulder your tools and make your way through mud-slick streets, through alleys where rats scurry past your ankles. Not because you are strong, not because you are brave, but because you cannot do otherwise. This work, the lifting, the cleaning, the burying it, lives inside you now. It gives your days a shape. It gives your silence weight. There is a strange kind of love in it, though you would never call it that. A devotion, a responsibility that no one asked you to take, but which you carry all the same. You speak to the dead because the living do not listen. You remember names long after they've been forgotten. You run your thumb over carvings on weather-worn stones and whisper stories to the wind. You are unloved. You are unwanted. You are unpaid. But you are there. Always there. When the world ends for someone, when the candles go out and the sobbing stops, you are the one who stays behind. To bear witness, to close the door, to say, in your quiet, unshakable way, you are here. And I saw you. There are times when the sun is simply too public for what you do. The sight of an open grave unsettles the living, as if seeing it in daylight might tempt fate or draw the eye of something dark and listening. So more often than not, you work when the world has quieted, when the shutters are closed and the hearths are banked and the dogs no longer bark. You tie your boots in silence. You sling your shovel over your back, and you walk out into the night with only the moon for company. It is not fear that you feel as you cross the dark paths between the chapel and the edge of the graveyard. It is familiarity, comfort even. The stillness of midnight wraps around you like a wool cloak. The graves lie in rows like books on a forgotten shelf, and you know every one by name, even the unmarked ones. You know where the soil is soft and where it fights you. You know where the stones tilt and where the weeds cling. The lantern swings low from your hand, casting slow-moving shadows that dance along crooked crosses and mounds of earth. The only sounds are the scuff of your boots and the wind whispering through the long grass. This is where you feel most yourself unwatched, unhated, unjudged. The grave itself is never just a hole. It is a passage, a chamber, a final cradle. You dig not just for depth, but for peace. The earth has moods sometimes forgiving, crumbling easily under your blade, and sometimes hard-packed with frost, resisting every strike like a clenched fist. When the ground is frozen, your breath comes in sharp white clouds, and each shovelful feels like carving stone. Still, you do it. Methodically, measured. You pace yourself by the stars above, letting the rhythm of the digging keep time. The thud of earth, the scrape of metal, the soft hiss as loose soil spills onto the growing pile. There's something hypnotic in it. A meditation. A way of speaking without words to the night around you. You've seen the moon through every season, from this graveyard fat and golden in harvest, thin and silver in spring. You've seen shooting stars fall like prayers, silent and wasted. Once, you paused your work to watch an owl perch on a gravestone, staring at you with eyes too human for comfort. You nodded to it. It blinked and flew away. The living may fear you, but the night does not. The night knows you. The stars do not care if your hands are dirty or your heart is tired. They shine anyway, just bright enough to show you where to place the next cut of your shovel. You've come to love these hours, even if you'd never say so aloud. In the darkness, the cruelty of the world softens. There are no whispers, no accusations, no coinless hands offering thanks with nothing behind them. There is just the work. And in that work, a purity, a quiet purpose. No one watches you here. No one asks questions. You don't have to explain why you speak to the bodies as you lower them. You don't have to justify lighting a candle for someone no one else bothered to mourn. The moon does not judge when you pause and rest your chin on your hands, the grave halfway dug, your breath short and your arms aching. In the night, everything feels ancient and sacred, as if you are part of something larger, something older than grief or shame. The wind rustles the grass like a lullaby. The lantern light flickers on the edge of the hole. And as you finish, as you place the final plank or stone or shroud, you whisper the same thing. You always whisper, "You're safe now." It's not a prayer. Not really. It's a promise. And then you gather your tools, stretch your stiff back, and walk home under the same moon that watched you dig. Not because you have to, but because the dead deserve company, even in darkness, especially in darkness. There is a peculiar burden to rituals, especially when no one sees you perform them. People think death is one grand actor burial, a bell, a prayer. But it isn't. It is dozens of smaller acts, strung together by someone who knows how to carry grief without making a sound. You do not simply dig and cover. You guide the body from breath to memory, and that requires more than shovels. It requires knowledge, reverence, timing. The preparation begins with the death bell, if one is told. But often now, in this time of sickness and sudden ends, even that is forgotten. And so you take it upon yourself to honour what others neglect. You bind the feet gently with linen. You fold the hands, even if rigour has not yet released its grip. You whisper the names, if you know them. If you don't, you say whatever words comes off nothings, small comforts that carry more sincerity than most eulogies. Sometimes there are families, and they request traditions that feel heavy with meaning. A coin beneath the tongue, salt in the pockets, a cross made of straw tucked into the bodice. You do it all. Not because you believe in every one of them, but because they do. And belief in death is a fragile threadone you do not break. There are times when a priest comes, and he does the chanting and the gestures. His voice is sure, his hands clean, his robe stiff with incense. He nods at you once, maybe, and steps away when it's time to lower the body. You hold the weight. You guide it down. You hear the way the family breathes when the rope goes taut. And, even though the priest says the words, it is your silence that fills the space after. You know that most people don't see you during these moments. They're too focused on the casket, on the tears welling behind their eyelids, on the sound of birdsong that feels wrong on a day like this. But your presence is constant, like the wind unnoticed, but shaping everything. You have learned dozens of rituals over the years, not just from the church, but from the old women who whispered them to you when no one else would. How to tuck rosemary under the tongue to prevent wandering spirits. How to circle the grave 3 times widdershins before placing the first stone. How to tie red thread around a finger to keep evil away. You do not mock these customs. You honor them. Because grief is not rational. It is not clean. It needs rituals, no matter how strange to give it shape. And your work is to hold that shape steady so that the living can grieve without breaking. But sometimes the rituals are only for you. When no one comes. When the body is left at your door in the hush of night, a bundle of cloth and limbs, and the scent of abandonment. These are the moments when the weight of the work presses hardest against your ribs. No name, no mourner, no story, just a life extinguished and discarded. And still, you give them your time. You lay them out carefully. You light the candle. You speak, even if it's only, I see you. You're not forgotten. These are the private rituals, the ones that belong only to you. You find stones that fit just right in the palm and place them by their head. You write small notes and bury them with the body scraps of poetry, old prayers, lines you remember from songs no one sings anymore. It's foolish, maybe. It's unnecessary. But it's yours. And in these quiet gestures, you find your reason. You are not a priest. You are not a savior. But you are a witness. And in death, sometimes that is all a soul needs. Not salvation. Just someone to notice they were here. There is no gratitude in your work, at least, not from the living. They never thank you for carrying the dead, for arranging the bodies with gentleness, for whispering their names in the dark. No, you are the one they turn to when the whispers grow too loud, when grief crosses the line into suspicion. The Undertaker is the keeper of the last secret, the final witness to a death they want buried with more than just the body. And so, it is always you who is accused when things go wrong. When the corpse shows signs of abuse, when a wife is found in her bed, throat slit, and her husband insists it wasn't him, couldn't have been. The accusations always circle back to you, the man who handles death without flinching. The one who knows too much about the darkness that comes after life. Sometimes it is just a quiet murmur. How could he have prepared her so quickly? Was there enough time? Sometimes it is louder. I saw him standing too close to the house the night he died. What was he doing there? They think you know things you shouldn't, that you understand the motives behind a death better than the grieving family. But you don't. You only know the facts, the cold, unfeeling facts. The angle of a knife, the way a body slumps in the night. But you never know the why. And yet, you are the first one they look to. You are the one who could have done something more. The one who should have seen it coming. But you weren't the one to kill. You were only the one who buried the body. And that is enough to make them wary of your hands. They try to paint you as something sinister. They blame you for not speaking, for not explaining, for letting their secrets remain just that, secrets. The living want closure. They want to know how their loved ones died. They want justice. But justice doesn't come with a clean answer, and the dead cannot explain themselves. You know that better than anyone. You've seen it in their empty eyes, the questions they leave behind. And when the accusations come, you are forced to stand silent. Because if you speak too loudly, if you defend yourself too vehemently, you'll only confirm their suspicions. You are the one who touches the dead. You are the one who removes the last trace of life. You are the one who wraps them up in cloth and carries them away, as if nothing were different, as if death were just another part of the world. But they don't understand that. To them, death is unnatural. It is wrong. And anyone who handles it too casually, who moves through it as though it were just another chore, must surely be as cold as the bodies they touch. Once, a woman came to you with a young man, her son. The boy was thin, frail, and paleone, of those who never quite grew strong enough to make it through to adulthood. She asked you to prepare him. He had died quietly in his sleep, no violence, no struggle. But she wanted his body dressed in his finest clothes, as if a good suit could erase the sorrow that filled her chest. You did as she asked. You arranged him carefully, brushed his hair, and whispered something to him. Anything, really. Something to fill the silence. When you finished, she thanked you, but there was no warmth in her eyes. She left without a word. You felt the weight of her grief, like a heavy stone pressing against your lungs. And that was when the rumours started. That night, perhaps it was her son's father, or a neighbour came to you, eyes narrowed in suspicion. "What did you do to him?" they asked. "What did you do to make him look like that?" You didn't answer. You didn't have to. You knew what they were implying. It wasn't enough that you'd simply buried the boy. It wasn't enough that you had dressed him in his best clothes. No, they thought you had been involved. They thought you had done something to keep him, to preserve him. They thought you had made him look too peaceful, too perfect, as if he were still alive. You had not, of course. You had simply done your work as always, out of necessity and respect. But that didn't matter. They had already cast their suspicions, and now you would wear them like a cloak. You would never escape them, no matter how many graves you dug, no matter how many bodies you prepared. They come to you quietly, carried on stretchers by the watchman, found in alleyways, pulled from the river, left in ditches. No names, no kin, no one to cry for them. Just a body thin or swollen, dressed or naked, young or impossibly old, waiting for for someone to do what no one else would. You are that someone. You have always been that someone. There is no priest for these souls, no bell, no cloth-covered mourners, just you and the dead and the silence that always arrives with them. You don't ask questions. You can't. It's not your place. Still, you wonder sometimes. Who were they? What had they hoped for? Who did they love, if anyone? Did they die with a name on their lips? Or did they know, even in their final breath, that no one would come looking? It's this, more than the rot or the weight or the stench, that haunts you the loneliness. A body is just meat without memory, and yet you give them one. A small one. Enough to matter. You wash them, as you always do. You whisper to them. You tuck a wildflower into the folds of their shroud. If there is a scar, you run your finger along it and say, softly, I see you. Because someone must. You've built a quiet ritual for these ones, the forgotten. It changes slightly depending on the season, the way the wind moves, the way the ground feels beneath your boots. But the bones of it remain the same. You carve a simple mark into a wooden token, never a name, because you do not know it, but a symbol. A line, a curve, sometimes a circle, each one unique. You place it at the head of the grave. You return to it later, when the world is still, and you sit beside the earth and press your palms to the dirt and whisper whatever came to you while you buried them. You might say, you mattered, or I wish it had been different. Once you sang. A song your mother sang, though you barely remember the words. You sing anyway. The tune alone is enough. The crows gather in the trees nearby. The grass bends toward the soil. There is something sacred in these moments, something deeper than ceremony. These bodies will not be remembered by history. No one will write their names in records or etch them into stone. But for one night, 1 hour, 1 breath of time, they are known. You carry them in your hands. You let them borrow your voice. And, when you walk away, they do not follow. But they stay, somehow. Their presence quiet. Steady. Like mist. You've buried so many now. Too many. Sometimes you dream of them. Not in horror, not in nightmares, but in silence. You see them sitting together under moonlight, side by side, all the nameless ones. They do not speak. They do not move. They just exist. Calmly. Peacefully. Waiting. You do not know what they're waiting for. Maybe for someone to find them. Maybe just to be remembered one more time. And always, in these dreams, you are standing just beyond the circle. Watching. Not part of them, not quite. But not separate either. You wake from these dreams with the scent of earth in your nose and the weight of something warm and invisible pressing against your chest. You take a moment. You breathe. You light a candle. And then you prepare for the next. Because there is always a next. Another body, another grave, another life lost without ceremony. And you will dig. And you will clean. And you will say the words that no one else will. Because in a world that forgets so easily, you have chosen quietly, steadily, stubbornly not to forget. Not today, not ever. You've learned how to keep your face still. You've mastered the art of closing your throat around the sorrow that rises when a mother wails, when a body comes to you broken or bloated or half buried. You know how to move your hands with quiet skill, how to lower the dead into the ground, with a dignity that is rarely offered in life. But no matter how many you've buried, no matter how much soil you've carried on your back, the children are the worst. They are too light. That's the first thing. Your muscles, trained for the weight of adult bodies, feel off balance as you lift them. They don't fight gravity the same way. Their limbs hang differently. Their hands, impossibly small, still soft at the fingertips. The curve of their cheeks. The lashes that look like they might still flutter. They are too close to life. Too recent. The warmth has only just left them. Their toys still lie scattered on their beds. Their names are still warm on their parents' tongues. And you, always you, are the one who comes to carry them away. No one looks you in the eye when you do. Not even the priest. Especially not the parents. They can barely stand. They just nod or collapse into arms that aren't yours and let you do what they cannot. You treat these bodies with a kind of reverence that makes your hands tremble. You bathe them with rose water when you can. You smooth their hair. You tuck little tokens into their shrouds ribbons, carved animals, scraps of coloured cloth. You never rush. Never. These are the ones who deserve slowness, softness. You still remember the first child you buried. A girl, 5 winters old. Red ribbons in her hair. She had been caught in a fire. They wrapped her in a sheet before you arrived, but you still remember the smell of scorched cloth and blistered skin. Her mother couldn't let go of her hand, and you had to wait for hours, sitting in the dirt beside them, until the woman finally loosened her grip. Even then, she kissed the child's forehead over and over again until the priest gently pulled her away. When you lifted the girl into your arms, you thought something in your chest would tear. And later, when you placed her in the ground, you caught yourself whispering to Hernanson's words, comforting sounds. You didn't realize you were rocking slightly, the way someone might cradle a living child to sleep. That night, you scrubbed your hands raw. Not from dirt, but from grief. And even now, every time a child comes to you, the ache returns. Familiar. Unforgiving. The grave for a child feels different beneath your shovel. Shallower. Not because you care less, but because the body takes less space, and still it feels wrong. The earth itself seems to protest. It clings to the blade. It refuses to give way. The wind, the birds, the world itself seem too loud, too cruel in those moments. And yet, you continue. Because someone must. You lower the small coffin, or the wrapped bundle, or sometimes nothing at all but bones found long after, and you whisper the same words. always the same. I'm sorry. Not because it's your fault, but because someone needs to say it. You light 2 candles, not 1. You press a toy into the earth. You wait longer before you walk away. And after, when you return home, you often find yourself sitting in the corner of your room, staring at nothing, hands still curled, as if holding something too fragile to put down. People talk about the horrors of plague, of war, of famine. But you've seen the smallest coffins. You've closed the smallest eyes. And you know truly, deeply, that the children are the worst. Because they were not supposed to go. Because every burial feels like the world has made a mistake. And yet, the world never apologizes. So you do. With every grave. With every name. With every step you take back into the dark. You walk the narrow line between scripture and superstition. The priest tells you death is sacred, orderly, divine. Dust to dust. Ashes to ashes. But the villagers don't live their faith in straight lines. They come to you whispering things the church never speaks of. They tell you not to bury a man on a Tuesday, or his soul won't rest. They place coins not just over eyes, but under tongesso, the dead can pay the boatman on the river of shadows. You're asked to bury lovers with sprigs of rosemary to keep their hearts close, to place thorns at the feet of murderers to bind their guilt in the afterlife. You do it all. Not out of belief, always, but because belief is a fragile thing, and in death, people cling to whatever makes the pain quieter. You've tucked garlic into the shrouds of those said to wander. You've scattered salt in a circle around graves. You've been asked to bury a man face down, so his spirit wouldn't rise again. These rituals are old, older than the chapel's bell, older than the stone steps worn smooth by barefoot prayers. And you've come to understand that faith isn't just in candles and hymns. It's in the small, trembling requests of those who fear that death might not be the end, but the beginning of something worse. You've buried women who were said to be witches. Not condemned, not tried just, suspected. They died quietly. Alone. Their homes already half emptied by the time you arrived. No one followed the coffin. No priest spoke their name. But their neighbours stood behind curtains, watching, holding sprigs of yew and muttering prayers. You felt their eyes on your back as you worked. You knew what they feared, that if the burial wasn't done right, if the body wasn't placed just so, something would come scratching at their windows. You've placed iron nails in mouths. You've tied wrists with red thread. Once you were asked to bury a man with a brick in his jaws, so he can't whisper curses from the grave, they said. You didn't argue. You just did it. Because you've seen the way fear poisons grief. It twists it, turns it into suspicion, into desperation. People want to believe that the right ritual will protect them, that death, when wrapped properly, won't spill out into the world. The church may scoff. But the church doesn't stand alone in the graveyard at midnight. You do. You've heard things the priest never will. The way the wind shifts when a body isn't buried right. The strange stillness that settles when a grave isn't accepted by the earth. You don't need a sermon to tell you when something's wrong. You feel it in your bones, in the silence that follows you home. Still, for all the talismans and tokens, there are moments that shake even your certainty. A woman buried with a copper mirror beside her fascia a month later. Her husband claimed she came to him in dreams, eyes full of fire. A boy placed in the family plot, only for his younger sister to fall ill the next morning, whispering his name over and over. A man whose grave sank too quickly, the soil collapsing again and again no matter how many times you refilled it. You tell yourself, these are just stories, coincidences. The human mind, looking for patterns in the dark. But late at night, when the candle flickers and the wind slides under your door like a whisper, you wonder. You wonder if some part of the soul clings. If grief, when strong enough, becomes its own kind of presence. You don't speak of these thoughts, not even to yourself. But when someone comes to you asking for a circle of stones, or a bell tied to the finger of the dead, or a charm sewn into the lining of the shroud, you nod. You do it, because in this work, you've learnt the truth the church doesn't always tell, that not every ghost is born of sin. Some are born of sorrow, and it is not your place to decide what is holy, only to lay the body down and whisper, rest. You used to think the earth was final. A grave was a grave sealed, settled, sacred. But time has taught you otherwise. Graves do not remain still. The earth shifts. The soil sinks. Bones rise. Rain undoes what you once buried with careful hands. You've seen teeth resurface, small and round as seeds. You've seen ribs poke through the dirt like pale roots. A heavy rain collapses a child's grave, and you're called back to set it right, to press the world into place again. There is no rest for the ground, only a kind of uneasy swallowing. You dig, you fill, you step away, and still the earth pulls, breathes, forgets. Sometimes, when the graveyard runs out of space, you are ordered to reuse a plot. Old enough, they say, waving their hands. Decades. No kin. No one left to mind. You nod. But when your shovel cuts into soft earth and strikes something hard, something shaped like memory, you pause. You've seen skulls with hair still clinging. Femurs tangled like sleeping limbs. Rings still on fingers. There's no reverence in the command to make room. But you try, all the same. You set the bones aside gently. You speak to them the way you did the first time. I'm sorry. They didn't wait long enough. There is a rhythm to these acts, a grim familiarity. You carry the old bones to a corner of the yard, a charnel pit where others have been left before others, whose names were lost long ago. You do not stack them. You lay them side by side, like old friends gathering again. You cover them with cloth, when you have it. You light a candle. Always. Even when no one asks you to. Especially then. The gravedigger's hands are not meant for justice. Only memory. And you remember them, each one. Not by name, but by how they felt in your hands. The man with the broad shoulders. The woman with a crooked jaw. the child whose ribs were so thin you thought they'd break just lifting them. You have learned to measure time in fragments of bone. A knuckle, a tooth, the curve of a spine worn smooth by years under soil. You think sometimes about the weight of the earth, that it never stops asking for more. More lives, more bodies, more forgotten stories to press into its belly. And you wonder if one day the earth will swallow everything. Not in violence, but in hunger, slow, endless, gentle, like it always has. But still you return. You keep digging. You keep laying down the dead. You patch the graves when they cave in. You retie the stones when they tilt too far forward. You whisper apologies to the bones you displace. Because if you don't, who will? No one else wants this task. No one else wants to feel the skull crack softly beneath the blade of their shovel. No one else wants to carry bone dust on their clothes, the way you do, the way it settles into every fold of your skin. And yet, this is where you belong. In the space between burial and forgetting, in the gap between memory and decay, you are not afraid of the earth. Not anymore. You've come to see it for what it is, not cruel, just constant. The earth never judges. It takes all equally. It does not care whether a man was noble or wicked, whether he died in peace or screaming. It opens its mouth just the same. And you, with your quiet hands and aching back, are the one who feeds it. Not with malice, not with joy, but with the steady, endless devotion of someone who understands the earth is never done swallowing. And neither are you. Sleep does not come easily to you anymore. When it does, it is never clean, never deep. You drift in and out like a leaf on slow water, never fully sinking, never quite resting. The dreams come often. Not nightmares, not exactly, but memories twisted into quieter hauntings. You dream of bells first. Always the bells, tolling softly in the distance, their echoes long and low, as if they were ringing underwater. Sometimes it's the chapel bell calling out for the dead. Sometimes it's the small handbell you once saw tied to a corpse's wrist, the kind meant to sound if they woke beneath the dirt. You dream of that bell often. It rings once, sharp and silvery, and in the dream you are standing over a grave, frozen, listening. But no one climbs out. No one returns. Still, you wake with your skin damp, your heart heavy. You lie in the dark, eyes open to the ceiling, listening to silence that seems too thick. On those nights, you light a candle and sit by the window. You do not speak. You just watch the wind move through the branches and try to remember the last time you truly rested. The dreams shift, as dreams do. You're always digging. The dirt is soft, almost too soft, falling away in chunks, sliding like sand through your fingers. You never reach the bottom. Just more earth. More weight. You dig for someone specific, though you never know who. A face you half remember. A name you almost speak. But just before you find them, something changes. The grave is filled with water, or bones, or flowers. Once it was coins, dozens of them, falling from the sky, landing all around you like hail. They made no sound when they hit. Just silence. And always, always, you are alone. Even in the dreams, no one comes with you. Not the priest. Not the families. Just you and the sound of metal on earth, breath in your chest, and the ache in your hands that you feel even after you wake. Some mornings you rise and check your palms, convinced you'll find them bruised and dirt-stained. Some mornings you do, though you're never sure if it's from the dream or from the night before some burial you did without remembering, some grave you patched up in your sleep. But the worst dreams, the ones that leave you hollow air, the quiet ones. No bells, no digging. Just a field, or a room, or a road, and the dead are there. Not as bodies. Not as ghosts. Just present. Sitting. Watching. Waiting. You recognize them by their silence. By the way they tilt their heads when they see you. You walk among them, but no one reaches out. No one speaks. And still, you feel something pass between you. A kind of understanding. You wake from these dreams with tears you didn't know were falling. You touch your own face, surprised. In the daylight, you push these dreams away. You stack wood, wash your tools, mend your robes. But at night, they return. And in them, you are always the same. Tired, alone, surrounded by those you've buried. You are not afraid of them. You never have been. But you wonder, sometimes, what they want. If they are waiting for something, or if they are just echoes carried forward by your mind, a mind too full of graves and not enough forgetfulness. You dream of bells and dirt, and somehow you know you always will. They will not remember your name, not in the songs, not in the records. The scribes and historians will write of kings and knights and holy men, of battles won and altars raised, but not of you. You were never meant to be remembered. You were the one who stood behind the curtain, who waited for silence, who came only when all others had gone. Your life has been shaped by shadows shaped, by bodies carried and graves dug, by rituals performed when no one watched. You live alone. You will die alone. But you know now, in a way that only time teaches, that your solitude was never empty. The world needs its quiet hands, its quiet eyes, its quiet acts. You think of every name whispered into the earth, every cloth tucked beneath a chin, every child laid down with gentleness. These things do not echo loudly, but they linger, not as legacy, but as residue-like warmth on a stone long after the sun has moved on. They say the grave is the end. But you know better. It is where someone must begin to remember. The children you buried, no one speaks of them anymore. The old women, the soldiers, the lost. Their graves are overgrown, their names worn away. But sometimes a stranger places fresh flowers on a forgotten stone. A gesture without knowing why. You like to believe that's your work, still breathing. That something of your care remains in the world's marrow, even if the world doesn't realize it. You've passed no title to anyone. You've trained no apprentice. And yet, someone always comes. A boy who lingers too long in the churchyard. A girl who watches your hands instead of the prayer. They ask no questions, but they see. Just as you once did. And maybe, one day, when your bones have been laid into the earth by hands that shake with grief or reverence or both, one of them will take up the shovel. Not because they are told, but because they understand. Because they too have seen how the world turns away from death, and how someone must stay to make sure the turning is gentle. This is how legacy moves when it is honest. Not in monuments, but in gestures, in habits, in soft rituals repeated for reasons no one can name. So now, as your breath grows shorter, as your fingers begin to curl with age, you find yourself resting more often by the graves. You sit with them, whispering nothings, remembering details you never meant to keep. A woman's laughter, the feel of a boy's scarf, a lullaby hummed through cracked lips. You speak these things aloud, as if sending them back into the soil where they belong. When the wind rises, you close your eyes and let it move through your hair like a blessing. You are tired, but you are not bitter. You know what your life has meant. You know what the dead have given you. Not fear, not despair, but presence. A truth most people never learn until it's too late, that there is beauty in the final moments, that there is grace in endings, and that to care for what has passed is also to care for what remains. You are an Undertaker. You were never celebrated, but you were never forgotten not by the ones who mattered. And when your time comes, you will lie down knowing you were the last kindness many ever received. And that is a legacy no grave can hold.